Good morning, you all, and welcome to Beyond Bitcoin. We are missing our colleague, Derek Graham. He is out on some personal commitments. And to me now, I have my good friend, Greg Elton, who is a brilliant analyst at Portal Asset Management. Greg, welcome again to Beyond Bitcoin. I think you're no longer a stranger on the show. You know how we roll. So welcome again.
Thank you very much, Nitin. Good morning, and good morning to everyone on listening in. Yep.
Good morning, even though it's good evening in Texas. Good morning, and I'm not traveling this week, which is great. So, Greg, tell me again, we usually use the term "lot happening this week," though I think crypto in general has been, besides the political sort of narratives that are going back and forth and a few things that happen on an incremental basis. What's your overall take on what transpired last week, and what's your perspective? Because there are a few key things that actually happened that week that are notable, both in terms of investment, but also in terms of things that are essentially moving the industry forward. So tell us your perspectives and share what you've learned from last week.
Yeah, look, I'll certainly try. But look, we've seen really choppy price action in Bitcoin in the last week. From the macro perspective, we went from having concerns about an economic recession in the US, if you remember when those unemployment numbers came out, and then we got different employment numbers and the market was no longer thinking about recession. So the market's a little bit schizophrenic at the moment. So Bitcoin's pretty choppy. It's really struggling to break above 60,000 at the moment. And it was in an in-between zone at the moment. But one thing I'm really noticing is crypto seems to be coming up in discussion in US politics a lot more. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And I think you've got some particularly good insights into what's happening there.
Yeah, man. I think you can't escape if you're living in the US or even if you're living anywhere in the world. Crypto and politics have just taken over the narratives. And as Greg, I was at Bitcoin conference in Nashville. And for the first time, we had about 19 different senators and congressmen. Of course, the ex-president Donald Trump took the center stage. There was a lot of conversation. And this week, of course, the Democratic National Convention kicks off. It kicks off today in Chicago. It officially kicked off a few hours back. And the rumors of Gary Gensler as Treasury Secretary versus firing Gary, which was the narrative that transpired a few weeks back in Nashville. So this narrative just gets interesting, and the US politics and crypto narratives continues to intertwine when there's not just fundraising efforts. If you recall, during the Nashville area, Republicans were able to, I think to last count was 56 million during the last few weeks, was able to generate from various super PACs who had massive support from the likes of the Winklevi brothers and the Ryan Selkis of the world. Massive support. I'm in that camp too, for the record, only because it's our business and we have to protect the interest of our business and garner the support that the industry needs. And then interestingly, Greg, there's a separate group called Crypto for Harris. And I knew a few individuals in that group which had a organization, and Kamala Harris didn't actually show up for that, interestingly enough. And you had some politicians, for example, who actually showed up to discuss this. In fact, I myself engaged with a gentleman called Ro Khanna, congressman from California. You had Chuck Schumer, who is one of the leaders in the House. And nothing groundbreaking, to be honest with you. There's no conversation. And this is a challenge to me, Greg, because Democratic leadership has incumbency, which means that they have to really have a narrative that not only supports or provides a corrective action in the next sort of election and post-election if they were to be back in the office. It's messy, I would say. It's really messy. To me, it's no real leadership, whether it's a policy framework or making an attempt to understand the industry. And my message on Twitter, for example, Greg, has been that it's not just about a currency. It's about technical innovation. It's about building a new trust system, and you're holding the innovation back by having these other elements. So it's been super interesting, but it's also exhausting, Greg. And it's just tiring to have the same conversation, and you find that it's not productive anymore from policy perspective. But the biggest thing that has been kicking on crypto Twitters in the past 2 days is, as much as the industry despises Gary Gensler, and the expectation, or there is rumors mill that he's been considered as Secretary of Treasury, which is basically a reward for him to stand up against the crypto community. That has been quite messy. I'm sure you've heard nuggets of this in Australia, but love to get what is the sentiments there and the perspectives there. Or you simply don't care, which is fine too. The US politics.
I think as I think as an Australian, I don't care, but as an investor in digital assets and crypto, certainly in terms of what impact the SEC has on the ecosystem is very important to be aware of. And I think I remember hearing about Gary being touted as Treasury Secretary 18 months ago. And that's why he's towed the line of what the Democratic Party's told him to do. And I think you saw that coming through with the ETH ETF approvals. The way it so quickly turned around, did a 180 and approved them so quickly. So he's clearly at the beck and call of the DNC. Sure. And let's see how it pans out. But I guess hopefully it will be a situation that whatever the outcome of the US election, and let's face it, we've still got another, 3 months worth of debates and coverage, that it should be beneficial for crypto and digital assets in general as a broad comment, but one party probably would have a better policy than the other at the moment. That's probably, I guess.
I agree, and I think there was poly markets, which is prediction markets, have all laid out Kamala Harris as the winner, but there's another study which said it doesn't really matter. The Bitcoin neither cares nor should care about who the president is because it has its own narrative, and that's the whole point, except that it just makes it easier for the asset class to flourish. But other parts of the world, in the same breath, I found something interesting, Greg. Remember the Trump NFT, the one that he launched NFT with it's a meme coin, which basically, apparently the former president in his second term and is a hopeful, benefiting from two distinct phenomena that actually happened this week, which I thought was super interesting. One is the secondary NFT sales. So this is if you remember the ERC 721 standard, which basically allowed for you to obtain royalties from secondary sales. If you remember that whole Ethereum standard, he's apparently gotten royalties which exceeded his apprentice royalties, if you remember, which I think was fantastic, crazy. And the token taxes paid by unofficial meme coins was that, and of course the money that he made from the actual token themselves wasn't about 2 million or something, which I think was just a crazy number, which to me is telling, and no wonder you have a positive support from President Trump, of course. I thought that was super interesting. But the question for you is on Wrapped BTC. I think that was interesting turn of events when the community comes together, and this is not political, legal, or anything else. Tell us more about what you've heard and what's going on that front, because I believe that BitGo, the crypto exchange and the custodian, was the primary custodial of this wrapped Bitcoin asset, which was issued. And they'd struck a deal with Justin Sun's Tron ecosystem. So tell us more about what's going on in that world.
Yeah, perhaps for the benefit of our viewers, it's perhaps worth taking a step backwards and explaining what Wrapped BTC is. So basically, as we know, Bitcoin is a proof of work coin. So it's not a proof of stake. So you can't stake your Bitcoin and earn Bitcoin on the side by validating transactions. It's proof of work. So what entities have done is they've taken the Bitcoin, they've wrapped it, and they've put it onto the Ethereum ERC20 token, and that's enabled you to then use your Bitcoin within the DeFi ecosystem and earn some income from it. There's always been concerns about WBTC, and I think those concerns are starting to increase at the moment. I think it was Maker that decided that they weren't going to offer loans against it anymore, and that's having a bit of an impact in its terms of popularity. But I will offset that by saying a couple of things. Firstly, you have the OPCAT, the 420 BIP proposal at the moment that potentially would allow smart contracts on Bitcoin, on the Bitcoin core. You could actually see some DeFi protocols, in addition to what's happening with the Bitcoin Layer 2s. And you're also seeing protocols like Zeus with their Apollo project that are basically allowing a form of BTC staking within the Solana ecosystem. So you'll have ZBTC for Zeus. Yeah. Interesting also what Coinbase is doing. There's a CB BTC. Looks like they might be getting much more involved in utilizing your Bitcoin in some sort of a DeFi protocol. So that's TBA. We'll watch that one with interest to see how that develops. But certainly, it looks like WBTC is losing its dominance as the key form of getting Bitcoin into DeFi. But there's other protocols that are picking up the pieces and really running with it pretty aggressively now. So it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my read from this was that community in general is not a huge fan of Justin Sun, the Tron ecosystem. There were all kinds of issues when Tron itself has some wrapped assets in the Tron ecosystem, and they weren't able to produce any audit data. So there's a little bit of opacity in that ecosystem, which was showing, and I think is despite Mike Belchi, who is the CEO of BitGo's assurance to the industry that, hey, there is no involvement in its strategic partnership with BitGlobal as a part of that Justin Sun's ecosystem is going to be, and the industry, and including the MakerDAO, as you mentioned, is stopped using wrapped BTC as a collateral. And you're 100% right, Greg, that wrapping an asset itself provides a counterparty risk, whether it's a protocol risk or you have to trust some entity, and we know how that has happened in the past with FTX and Celsius and the likes. So having that collateral, but the attractive element is that Bitcoin, which today stands at 1.3 trillion market cap, Ethereum being 1/3 of that, it's a massive amount of liquidity that is trapped in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And all the projects that you mentioned with Opcode and Opcat and many of the smart contracts and other wrapped assets, including the Coinbase is on Base protocol, I think that provides an interesting avenue to see this ecosystem grow. So I'm going to keep an eye on this, but I think your assessment is spot on. Tell us more. I believe I read the headlines as part of preparing for this, is on Solana's growth. So let's switch from Bitcoin to Solana a bit. Significant strides, surpassing BNB, which was a pretty significant market cap, number 3 and number 4 from a coin market cap perspective. So it's bypassed, and obviously Solana to me was Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana was a third closest ecosystem. I myself, as an entrepreneur now, have signed with Solana, so we are quite close to that ecosystem as it's growing. Tell us more of what is transpiring. Isn't Solana taking advantage of all these things happening on the Ethereum ecosystem, which I'd love to get your perspective, why Ethereum is down in the past few weeks, the WBTC. Isn't Solana taking advantage of all these protocols and tapping into that movement, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've finally seen the tech stack on Solana improve to a point where it's institutional grade now. And I think for me, that was when Helium made that decision to move from their own blockchain onto Solana. That for me was like the tick of approval. And the tech stacks continue to improve since then. Obviously, we've got FireDancer coming through, and even we're also talking about ZK rollups as well now on the layer 1 Solana. So the potential, the security of the chain, and the reliability of the chain, and the speed of the chain, I think, is encouraging people to come onto Solana. You are seeing a lot of meme coin action still. I'm in 200 discords, and about 150 of them are trading Sol meme coins every day in and out. You're also seeing this Blinks protocol, which is interesting. That enables you to buy crypto using, for example, using X. You can just click on a button. As long as you've enabled your wallet, you can actually buy tokens, you can buy NFTs directly through Twitter, through X. So this increasing use of the technology, I think, is really driving adoption. And that's the chain's getting a little bit more congested, so people are having to pay a bit more in fees, but they're still very low. They're still less than 1 cent to do a transaction on Solana. Rent now is incredibly cheap. So if you're a dev, it's very cheap to launch a product or a token or a protocol on Solana now. And you're seeing big growth in DeFi, Camino, Drift, MarginFi. Drift just opened up another prediction market after seeing the success of Poly Market. There's a lot of copying that goes on, copy pasta, but it's really starting to flow through. ETH at the moment, it's really quiet. I'm looking at the ETH Guai at the moment, it's 0.9.
It's been lowest for...
Yeah. Doing a transaction on ETH is so cheap now, but that just tells me there's no one using the chain. There seems to be lots of use on the L2s. The base chain is really, I think, really interesting chain. Unfortunately, you can't get exposure to that. But the likes of Optimism, Polygon, etc. And you're starting to see some of these, the demand for ETH coming through in the ETFs now. But the ETH BTC ratio has been as low as it's been for quite some time. The market's it's having that question moment about ETH in terms of its long-term viability. I don't think that's a threat, but in terms of how it's going to value it, and I think Solana's a fraction of the market cap, although it's growing on ETH, and it's a more interesting opportunity, I think, at the moment.
No, I do agree. Minds. I think the Bitcoin ETF, I don't think Ethereum didn't meet the expectation, I think. And this week, the Bitcoin spot ETF, of course, had a decent inflow from last week's yen carry trade fiasco that you described early on. that was expected. In one day, we had this massive drop in both equities markets as well as crypto markets. But this week we saw some recovery, as you have seen with the surge in investment. I think this week there 45 million net inflows coming to Bitcoin ETF. And what's interesting, which is also attributable to, I think, to Solana's growth, is of course VanEck and some of the other entities have filed for the Solana ETF, as you know, in the US. I think Brazil approved the first spot Bitcoin ETF, or sorry, Solana ETF, with an increasing activity in Solana network, which you all described, I think all positive. But I'll tell you something else, Greg, which I'd love to get your perspective on this. I was working on a project called Ethos Labs, and the idea behind the project was to simplify the trading and the knowledge that's needed to simply move liquidity from various ecosystems and find the risk-weighted investment avenues into the various ecosystems. And when I was researching that, I realized that with AVSs, the actively validated services on EigenLayer and various restaking protocol, and that's another fiasco that actually happened this week, of backdoor sort of investments and preferential treatment to many of the employees, which I think tarnishes the image of the industry in general. But I think that if you were to sit down and try to understand the Ethereum ecosystem with all the updates and upgrades and layer 2s and DeFi protocols and restaking and staking, I think you need a PhD. It's getting complicated to fully understand the sprawl of that ecosystem. Yeah. What I don't know if that's attributable to discouraging investors, because capital seeks transparency, and if things are too complicated, capitalists tend to move to where things are simpler. Solana doesn't need or doesn't have both true, robust layer 2, because they don't need a layer 2 ecosystem, though there are some layer 2s being proposed. And it's gone back to a simple model to say, hey, Solana is a layer 1. There are these DEXs and AMMs and prediction markets. I'm just going to take my asset and put it there, as opposed to dealing with staking and restaking and other avenues. I don't know if that's attributable to it, but love to get your perspectives on that.
Yeah, I think it's certainly potentially an issue. You're right. If you want to have exposure to the Solana ecosystem, you can do it through one token. You can hold Solana, you can liquid stake it, you can use Jito or one of the Marinade, any different sort of liquid staking protocol, but it all stays in the ecosystem, and Solana is the main beneficiary of the fee generation. With Ethereum, you're right, you're spreading that capital across all of the L2s. Are the L2s going to grow quicker than the L1? Is the price performance of the L2s going to outperform the L1? So why should I own the L1? Why should I own ETH when I can own something else? So I think that's certainly true. And I think also from a user's perspective, a lot of people started on ETH. They did a bit of DeFi on ETH and they found it really annoying dealing with the gas fees. And I think that it's showing you that people have moved across to Solana. Solana now has the DeFi protocols that ETH has. You're seeing more TVL migrating across, and people don't seem to be coming back to ETH at the moment, certainly not on the layer 1. And I think that's a reflection in the GUI being so low at the moment, is there's not the number of transactions being done on there. It's as simple as that. And of course, ETH still has emissions, and it will burn the fees, so it is deflationary. Right. But if it's not earning enough in fees and all of that sort of fee revenue is going to the L2s, is it still deflationary? It's an extremely complicated beast to look at.
Sure, absolutely. Another notable thing was Toncoin. So two things me and you discussed this for the longest time. This the second attempt from the makers of Telegram, which is very actively, in fact, when I went to this entrepreneurial journey, Greg, I realized that a lot of business purely happens. There's no email. It's all happening on Telegram, which is connecting to ability for you to be able to classify the investors and having investor conversation, including sending the pitch decks and having your proposals all on Telegram. And I learned so much power of Telegram in this world that it's hard for you to keep up with WhatsApp, Telegram, text messages, and so on and so forth. But it's obviously a very dominant communication tool in the industry. And it's the second attempt. The first attempt, of course, was thwarted by the famous U.S. regulatory agencies to say, hey, this is not going to work. But this time around, strong rise. It's been listed on Binance. They also launched a Ton venture fund, which aims to support early stage projects, which is very powerful, which is something what X is trying to do, which is, as you mentioned, with some of the plugins, is facilitate payments as we've envisioned this use case. What is your take on it? What is your take besides the obvious that, hey, I'm going to use this token, that I'm using Telegram to communicate, I'm going to send you money, you can share money instead of going through 5 other tools to split payments and using Venmo or PayPal or WeChat. I'm going to use the same tool to pay money and move the value, and hopefully it grows to a point where I can actually move investment funds because that's tokenized in its form. What do you think is going on there besides the obvious?
Besides, the obvious thing is 900 million users, right? And the fact that it takes about 2 minutes to set up a Ton wallet and use it on Telegram. I think they are offering 15% APR on holding USDT within that wallet at the moment, so they're encouraging people to use it, use a payment mechanism. But I think the elephant in the room, and this is a bit of a play on that, is Hamster Combat. So that's the third largest app ever downloaded, 200 million users. It's on Telegram, and people are tapping away at their Hamster Combat because that is rumored to be the largest airdrop in crypto history, potentially bigger than the Uniswap airdrop. A lot of attention on Telegram, on the Ton coin at the moment, and that's really the success of these little protocols are coming now. What we're seeing is a lot of people that are signing up are coming from developing countries. I think it's a mechanism. It's almost like the next Axie Infinity, this Hamster Combat. It's providing an opportunity for someone to put in the man hours or the person hours, tapping away at their screen to earn an airdrop that's probably worth something to them in their country versus, say, in a developed economy. So it's seeing massive uptake, and I think that's just driving the whole ecosystem and then just driving the main token as well, to be honest.
Yeah, so what's interesting about Hamster Combat, I hadn't heard of it. I was in a conference, of course, a crypto conference, and I'm not a huge fan of tap to pay or whatever because I just think that human talent could be used for more productive things. And there was a founder from a company called Pacio who's trying to provide on-ramp, off-ramp into fiat. So he would take your crypto and convert to fiat. And he piggybacked on, and he was able to create an ecosystem of a few million users within a matter of a week and convert 200,000 off that every million. So his conversion rate was 20%. And I was like, wow, that is like a fastest growth, sustainable growth, to say, hey, I'm expecting 20% sustainable growth, or people who sign up for rewards or whatever the case is. So I think there is some truth to be said about that, but I think something to be watched, its progress going forward. So with that, Greg, we have to wrap, we are on time, but I'd love to understand anything else you'd like to add, any significant observations from your side, from the other side of the world, as you see it.
Yeah, we're just focusing on the Mt. Gox payments that are going out. Let's see what impact that has on Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact, to be honest. And then you've got the FTX settlement that is going out that's going out in dollars, not in crypto. So you could see quite a bit of buying pressure coming through for crypto once people get those dollars back into their accounts and back onto centralized exchanges. Yeah, and let's see how things play out with the macro this week. I think we've got the Jackson Hole speech from Governor Powell on Friday. So let's see how things panning out. But at the moment, we're still fingers crossed for a rate cut in the US in September.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Greg, always enjoy chatting with you, even on and off camera. And I guess I'll see you in Token 2049 in person. So we've been working with each other for almost a year, but I get to meet you in person and looking forward to hanging out and over a bowl of laksa, of course.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Singaporean, Malaysian Singaporean. All right. You take care, Greg, and we'll chat soon. You take care.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Thanks, Sid. Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed our weekly conversation. If you have any questions, comments, or suggested topics, please contact Nitin Gower or myself on the emails displayed here or via our LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to subscribe and share with like-minded friends. Stay well, inquisitive, and engaged. See you next week.